Imagine you just bought your dream house, 6 bedrooms, a beautiful tree-lined street in one of the wealthiest, safest towns in America. You have 3 kids. You spent your savings. This is the home where your family is going to grow up. And then, before you have even moved in, a letter arrives. Typed, no return address. It begins politely. Dearest new neighbor, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. And then it asks a question that will keep you awake for the next 5 years. How did you end up here? Did the house call to you with its force within? The letter is signed with 2 words, The Watcher. This is not a horror movie. This happened to a real family in a real town. The letters kept coming for years. The person who wrote them knew the family's names, their car, their children, which bedroom each child slept in. And despite police investigations, private detectives, and a former FBI profiler, the Watcher was never identified. To this day, nobody knows who wrote those letters, or whether they are still watching. June 2014, Westfield, New Jersey, a town that consistently ranks among the wealthiest and safest in the United States. Derek and Maria Broaddus had been living in Westfield for years, and when the 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard came on the market, it felt like the natural next step for their growing family. Derek had just turned 40. He had just been promoted to senior vice president at a Manhattan insurance company. They had 3 children, aged 5, 8, and 10. The house was a beautiful Dutch colonial revival, built in 1905. 4 bathrooms, 4 fireplaces, 2 porches, over a century of history. They paid $1.3 million for it. It was everything they had worked for. They decided to do some renovations before moving in. So for the first few weeks, the house sat mostly empty while contractors worked, and the family continued living at their old home nearby. And it was during those first few weeks, before a single night had been spent in the house, that Derek went to check the mail. Among the envelopes was one with no return address, hand addressed to the new owner. He opened it, and the nightmare began. The first letter was unsettling but almost gentle. It welcomed them. Then it asked strange questions. Did the house call to you? And then it explained who was writing. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s. My father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. The writer claimed his family had been watching the house for almost 100 years, that he had been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Derek called the police immediately. They advised the family to keep it quiet, to avoid tipping off whoever was responsible. But within weeks, more letters came, and they got worse. The Watcher knew things. He mentioned the family's car. He described the contractors doing the renovations. And then he wrote about the children. The Broadduses stopped bringing their children to the house. They never spent a single night there. Their dream home had become something they were afraid to enter. The Broadduses did everything right. They went to the Westfield Police Department. They hired private investigators. They brought in a former FBI profiler to analyze the letters. The profiler concluded that the Watcher was likely someone in their 50s or 60s, who lived nearby and who had a deep personal connection to the house or the street. The letters were analyzed for fingerprints, for DNA on the envelope seals, for the specific typewriter or printer used. The investigation looked hard at the neighbors. One family next door, longtime residents, became an early focus, but no evidence ever linked them to the letters. The private investigator staked out the street. He reported that some of the neighbors didn't seem normal, but suspicion is not evidence. The police investigated. The Union County Prosecutor's Office investigated. Nothing. No fingerprints they could use. No DNA match. No witnesses. The letters were typed, carefully worded, and left absolutely nothing behind. Whoever the Watcher was, they were careful, patient, and they seemed to know exactly how a criminal investigation works, and exactly how to avoid leaving a trace. The Broadduses were trapped. They couldn't move into the house. It was too dangerous. But they had spent their savings buying it. They tried to sell it. But now they faced a legal question. Did they have to disclose the letters to potential buyers? They did. And buyers walked away. They tried to tear the house down and split the property into 2 lots. The town planning board rejected the proposal. They rented the house out to another family for a while. And the watcher noticed. A new letter arrived, angrier than before. To the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife Maria. It taunted them. You wonder who the watcher is? Turn around. Maybe you even spoke to me, one of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the watcher could be. And then the letters took their darkest turn. One spoke of revenge, of bad things happening, maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe a mysterious illness. Loved ones suddenly die. Bones break. The watcher wasn't just observing anymore. The watcher was threatening, and still, nobody knew who it was. The Broadduses, who had never spent a single night in their dream house, finally sold it in 2019 for nearly $400,000 less than they paid for it. So, who was the watcher? Over the years, there have been theories. Some believed it was a neighbor with an obsession about the house. Some suspected it was someone who had a grudge against the family. Some even wondered, cruelly, whether the Broadduses had written the letters themselves to escape the mortgage. But that theory never made sense. They lost a fortune. They were terrified. They went to the police. The letters referenced details that an outsider watching the house would know: the cars, the contractors, the children, but also showed a strange, almost ceremonial obsession with the house itself that felt deeply personal. The new owners who bought the house in 2019 reportedly have not received any letters, which raises its own unsettling question. Did the watcher stop? Did they move away? Did they die? Or were they only ever watching that one family? And once the Broadduses were gone, there was nothing left to watch? We don't know. The letters were real. The fear was real. The threat to those children was real. And the person who sat somewhere on that quiet, wealthy, tree-lined street, typing letters, watching a family, counting their children, was never found. They might still live on that street today. They might still be watching. This has been The Dark Stories. Sleep well.